Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another webinar by Samera. My name is Arun and Smita Mehra, and tonight I will be talking about how to set up a profitable practice in 2016. Now, this is by far the most popular topic we've done, I think, well, in years actually. We've got hundreds of people actually registered for this webinar and more signing up as we speak. So it's going to be action-packed, full of hopefully useful content for all the listeners out there. I encourage you to ask questions. Whilst I might not be able to answer all of them at the same time, hopefully I can get through most of them as we go along. So tonight's topic is how to set up a profitable practice. And luckily for you, I've managed to grab my partner in crime, Smita Mehra.
Good evening, everyone.
And she will be joining us on this webinar tonight. Smita is not only my partner in crime, she's my wife, but she's also a very experienced clinician, dentist, and she'll be inputting in quite a lot of this webinar tonight. Right, so if we crack on and then we can introduce ourselves as we go along. Okay. So, about my experience actually. Myself, I'm Arun. I've been running Samera for the last 14 years. I have a lot of experience in working within dentistry, working with from associates to one-man band practices all the way up to some international large corporates which are private equity backed. So I've got a lot of experience helping in the dental industry. At the same time, I'm the managing director of Samera. I'm also the commercial director of the Neem Dental Group. And so I have a lot of hands-on experience in helping dentists grow their business. I'm a qualified chartered accountant, and I trained with PwC many years ago, so I've got plenty of grey hairs to show. And I'm an ex-vice president of Bank of America, so when it comes to funding, I do understand a little bit about how to raise finance and how to help businesses grow with the need of funding. Smita, I know I haven't got a slide for you, but do you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Smita Mehra. And I own and run the Neem Dental practice or practices. I've been doing this for the last 12 to 13 years and gone on. I'll be talking a little bit about the practices that I've opened. So we've more or less run squat to profit practice cycles, which I'm sure we'll talk about shortly. And my involvement with Samera is I'm the clinical director, so I help with dentists. I liaise between accountants, business advisors, the finance team and dentists, and I suppose I'm the linchpin that hopefully is there to help you to understand the finance and the business, and and vice versa, for them to understand you and where you're coming from. And that's where we are starting off today.
Sure, exactly. So we've got an action-packed hour to share a lot of information and a lot of experience between Smita and myself. So let's crack on with the slides. So tonight's agenda is quite loose, but talking about buying versus setting up, talking about business plans and forecasts and how important they are, talk about raising money, talk about understanding the dental market and how you'll fit into that, and also about what do patients want. Perhaps not in all that order, but we will crack on. So let's move on. So why setting up is a great option, I suppose how I'm going to start. Smita, do you want to start with this?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Aaron. So we're talking here really, this and the next couple of slides, about whether we should set up or whether we should actually acquire or buy an existing practice. So we're first looking at setting up. Now, I advise quite a few practitioners on a consultancy basis to help them buy or set up practices. And one of the common problems we find with all of these searches is that there's such a limited availability of practices for sale, or certainly practices that are in desirable locations or on desirable floors, that have all the relevant finance in place, that actually make sense from a business point of view, that are making a profit, or that don't have staff problems, or that are paperless, so you don't have hidden agendas to worry about. And of course, you're inheriting a bit of a burden. So there's a real scope here to start with a clean slate, to create something of yours and create your own piece of magic, and to make your dreams a reality. On the financial side, of course, if you're not buying somebody's goodwill, then there's a lower amount of money that you need, less of an investment, or a capital is required. A large part of goodwills, I'm sure Aaron will talk to you about the percentage of goodwills that people are charging for, but of course with a clean slate you don't have to worry about that, and you can more or less set any agenda. You can choose your location, work out who your demographic is that you want to treat, which we'll go into shortly, and there's just no baggage. You're not inheriting other people's rubbish, or other people's problems.
Okay, and move on to the next slide. So, and then what about buying a practice? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, obviously there are pros and cons to both sides, and the pros to buying a practice are, obviously the con is that you're paying quite a high price for the goodwill, but you certainly have some pros, and one of them is that you have an existing income, you have an existing patient base. So from day one, you're not having to strive to make a single bean. You already have a going concern, or you have a going income. But a few things you need to be wary of: are you buying at the right price? And so you need to seek advice from the right people to see that what you're buying, is it priced right? Are you actually getting what you're paying for? And there are so many hidden nooks and crannies that you need to be careful about. But if you do, and you buy at the right price, then you could be acquiring quite a good business. You're sort of sitting pretty. If it's a going concern with running associates, then you could argue that you could, in theory, be still working as an associate elsewhere, maybe 1 or 2 days on this business, and your existing associates could be running the show for you.
However, I think my input there is that it's never usually that easy, and I think buying practices, particularly in the southeast, people are paying a significant premium for practices. There are still obviously good practices to buy, but you have to work out what is the return on investment for you and what's the risk to you as well. Because as an individual, if you're buying a practice, you are going to, not always, but quite likely going to have to borrow from the bank, and the banks will always verify what you need, and who are you, what's your credibility, and ultimately, are you going to be able to repay the loan back?
And also, yes, you're right. And also, we have the problem of the last point here, which is, will the buyer stay on? I mean, we're currently advising people on buying certain practices, and really it's a toss-up between, let's say, 2 to 3 sites. If they're pretty much similar, and in one practice, the buyer really wants to exit as soon as possible, they want to retire or they want to move abroad, versus another practice where they're willing to stay on for a couple of years, we will always advise the latter, because your goodwill is still retained in some shape or form. Excuse me. So if the seller decides that they want to move on or retire or leave, then you're really running a high risk, and you need to be very careful. You're running a high risk that the goodwill that you've just paid for is going to walk out the door when he or she leaves. So that's a real big risk that you are taking, and so that's one of the other things of buying an existing practice.
Yeah, and I think there's an error on the slide. It should say, "Will the seller stay on?" not "Will the buyer stay on?" So apologies about that. But I think in buying a practice, in summary, there's pros and cons of setting up or buying, and our own experience of ourselves doing it, we've always done the former, where we've always set up practices from scratch. We've never seen the right practice to buy to date. I'm sure there are practices that are right for us to buy, but we think we have a pretty good evaluation and a good understanding of how to set up startup practices. And by no means is it easy, but over the years we've built this experience up further and further. And I think we made most of our mistakes on our first practice, and slowly less and less as we've gone on. So let's move on. So what do patients want, Smita?
Well, there's quite a few things. I mean, first, before you even go into what sort of practice you want to open, I think a very useful question to ask yourself is, who are your customers? And of course, as dentists, our customers are our patients. So and this is something we even learn at dental school, what are our patients after? And more importantly, what sort of are the barriers to them buying treatment or taking up our services? And I think the biggest thing that I've learned, certainly from running private practices in the London and southeast area, is that they're looking for three key things. They're looking for convenience first and foremost, and of course I'm talking about a certain demographic, the working population or the working folk of a place. So they're looking for convenience, which means working hours, which means 8 a.m. starts, which means lunchtime slots available, the phone's always answered, which means evenings and also weekends, to include Sundays as well. And we currently operate, not all, but some of our clinics do run 7 days a week, and we really find that Sundays is picking up in popularity more and more these days with our 7 day weeks. So care, of course, here I'm talking about patient care, which encompasses many things like skills of the clinicians, the auxiliary staff as well, and of course the front desk, which also encompasses customer service, looking after them, pampering them, making them feel like they're number one, nothing else, no one else is important, and we are there to service their every need. So I think these three things really are what we should be looking for when we want to open any kind of practice, or from NHS to independent to private. That really should be at the forefront of our minds. In terms of what their barriers are, their barriers towards us, our service, and what we have to sell in terms of our products and our services. One of the key things that patients we find that they have is fear of cost, fear of the dentist, fear of pain. The cost, of course, is the price, but also the unknown, i.e. not knowing. So when they come in, if we're not transparent, they fear. One of the fears or the barriers for them coming in is when they come in, they just think, my goodness, how much am I going to be charged for this? And give me the cheapest option possible. And just a lack of transparency. So I think these are the key areas we need to focus on before we even think about opening a practice, and how it is we will overcome these barriers.
All right, thank you. So if we move on. So what type of clinic should we set up? Let me ask this question to you, Smita. Before we opened up the Neem Tree, you opened up the Neem Tree back in 2004. What were your aspirations? What type of clinic were you looking to set up, and why?
Well, that's a good question, and I think this question for all of our community this evening is a good question to think about. I mean, everybody is clearly interested in perhaps opening up or starting up their own business, and I think that's a very valid point. Certainly for me, and I think this is common to every associate out there. They think about the clinic they work in. They often are dissatisfied with the way things are run. They don't feel they have the power or the control to change anything, even if it is for the betterment of the clinic. They don't feel they have a voice. They feel quite suppressed. They feel quite stifled by certain processes. And there's a common thread running amongst everybody, which is all of us, which is if I could, I would run it this way. If I could, I would open up this sort of practice. And I certainly think for me, working in central London as an associate at the time for a corporate, I felt very much all of these things that I've just mentioned. And I thought, well, I'd like to open some sort of holistic practice where we look after many aspects of the patient, the whole mind, body, spa type of dentistry, which is very common these days. But of course, 13, 14 years ago, it wasn't so much so. And I wanted to open a small practice. I wanted to make sure everybody in the team had a voice, and just have a very nice and pleasant environment where it felt like a family environment, but yet really the most important person was the patient coming through the door. So that's what we went about trying to set up.
Okay, thanks. So what about understanding demographics? How important is that?
Well, as we've touched upon earlier, I mean, understanding what it is your patients want, and more importantly, what your patients don't want or what they fear is key to the understanding here. But the next step, I suppose, is thinking about what you're trying to create and who your patients or your customers, who ultimately are they? Are they young yummy mummies? Are they students? Are they working folk? Are they business people? Are they city dwellers? Are they 50+ plus? Are implants on your agenda? What sort of dentistry do you want to do? And what sort of area do you want to work in? And what sort of patients do you want to see? So you then need to think about these patients. Let's say you've identified the area and the group of people you want to treat. You start to think the next obvious thing: where do they live? What sort of houses do they live in? What sort of cars do they drive? Where do they work? Where do they play? Which gyms do they go to? Which cafes do they go to? What restaurants do they like dining in? And of course, that then starts to spark down the line marketing ideas for you: marketing in the gyms, marketing in the restaurants, having creche facilities where mums talk to each other, NCT groups. I mean, the sky's the limit, but before you do all of that, there's a little bit of research that needs to happen around these areas. And of course, families are very, very useful to think about. If it is families you want to treat, then of course that can open up a lot of things like orthodontics, pedodontic dentistry, or indeed, if you want to treat the whole family, then cradle to grave dentistry. Or, as we did right at the beginning, Owen, didn't we? We treated a very narrow demographic, which was in Wandsworth Town, which we'll see in a minute. It was a 30 to 40-year-old young professional demographic, and we didn't really treat youngsters. We didn't really treat the elderly, and it was a very narrow niche. And I'd like to think we've got to know that niche very well and how to service them.
Sure. So, carrying on from this side, though, what type of clinic to set up?
So I mean, here again, you would think about obviously acquiring an NHS clinic or acquiring or setting up a private clinic. You'd want to know, is it a general clinic you want to set up? You might go to an area where there are lots of specialist clinics, but there aren't very many general clinics. And obviously that area clearly has a need for certain, for example, orthodontic or implant clinics, but there's no one actually, the primary caregiver or somebody to refer out to people. So you might find yourself a niche there, or indeed vice versa. There might be lots of general clinics, and once you've done some research on the demographic, you might think, well, there's lots of 50 plus here. Why don't I open, whether it's myself or whether it's an associate that I employ, to work to formulate a specialist clinic, and then of course. Within your clinic, if there aren't very many specialists in the area, you could start up a multidisciplinary service in-house. So first you would get your general dentistry and sort of nail that for the first 2 years, and then start building on that layer by layer. You might want to offer services like ortho, like implants, like cosmetic orthodontics, or indeed depends on the area and what it needs. So you would then look at which end of the market you're trying to cater to. So is it top end private? And of course you would have to research the relevant areas. Is it you want to go into middle income and put yourself just above the NHS bracket? Or do you want to offer almost NHS type dentistry but on a private basis? There really is a market for all types of dentistry. It's just about, I think, finding your niche and finding out what it is you're good at, and most importantly, what it is you're passionate about.
Yeah, okay. I think passion is a really important aspect here. And one of the questions, or there's a question that's popped up, but we'll address that in a minute. But one of the things that I'm seeing in the marketplace, and other people I know who are starting to set up, even specialists are saying that, well, I'm not going to set up a specialist clinic. I've had an orthodontist who visited me very recently. I'm not going to set up an orthodontic clinic. I'm going to set up a general clinic, and then that will feed my orthodontic business. And I think that's where things are going to go, because everyone's going to try and keep the patient base within the four walls increasingly, referring out, whilst obviously you want to do the best for the patient, increasing there are more specialists, increasing there are more clinics. So, and it's increasingly more and more competitive. Okay, so I think in our own Neem Tree clinics, I think a large proportion of the work is retained within the Neem Tree group. So am I right in saying that?
Yeah, we actually have we go out of our way to try and keep things in-house, and I certainly have sort of set things up whereby there's very little hands-on with myself. I'm more a filler-inner, I suppose, for people when they're sick and when they're on holiday. But what I've tried to do because of that is employ a group of dentists or a team of dentists who between them have a very complementary skill set. So we have people in one clinic who do offer perio and then implants, and then somebody else might offer 6-month smiles and cosmetic ortho. We also have specialist orthodontists who come in, as well as specialist periodontologists who come in. So we've sort of built that layer on layer and really assessed the need after offering 1 or 2 years of general dentistry, and then seeing what the need is. one of the questions, thank you, has come in about what do you think of setting up a dental hygiene clinic as opposed to, I suppose, a regular clinic, since direct access has become very popular. I think it's a great idea, but I think I wouldn't solely kind of isolate yourself just to that. I think one of the ways around this is because what we're finding more and more since direct access has come into favour is that direct access is bringing in a lot of patients. Certainly in our new clinic in Fleet Street, we're getting, our hygienist is increasingly getting a lot busier than the dentist, simply because people are time poor and money rich, and they simply want to come in, get their hygiene done and walk out again. It's a sort of vanity rich area, and it's all about how they look, and I suppose superficially how they feel. But what that's allowing us to do is allowing the hygienist who is very commercially minded to then book them in with the dentist, and clinically minded, book them in with the dentist to actually then get other treatment. And so, going back to the question of setting up a dental hygiene clinic, not a bad idea, but one halfway house would be to maybe employ dentists who want to work as hygienists, which is also very popular. And that way you're killing two birds. In other words, you're offering the hygiene, but actually being a dentist, they're working as a hygienist, but they have the eyes of a dentist. And so, they could either then, I don't know, set up another chairside time for dentistry, or indeed refer to another dentist who perhaps comes on a part-time basis.
So let's move on. So where should you locate your practice? Okay.
Again, that really depends on, firstly, where you live, where you come from, or where you're willing to move to. Certainly, we're advising one client at the moment who wants to relocate, and so it's less of an issue trying to find them a practice near to where they live, because they're more or less willing to move to where the opportunity is. But generally, we find you stick to the sort of area that you're in, you work out how far you're willing to travel, and then you kind of, it's like sticking a compass in it and working out a radius in which you're comfortable, and then looking at areas based on what we've just spoken about. In other words, if let's say you live in, I don't know, southwest London, that's fine. However, southwest London has so many different pockets of wealth, pockets of deprivation, pockets of greenery. You need to go and see which area you feel comfortable working in and which area is desirable for you.
And there's a question that's come up to me. So is it possible to set up a private clinic in a slightly poorer, predominantly NHS demographic? How would you overcome the cost of treatment barrier?
That's a great question. I think obviously you need to look at availability of property, you need to look at location. However, I do believe it is possible to open up a private clinic. I mean, maybe you wouldn't call it a top-end private clinic, you'd call it you'd pitch yourself at the sort of lower private end of the margin or the spectrum. You'd offer very competitive prices, but you would keep it private. I mean, the advantage of that is if you're the sort of clinician or principal who's used to working on the NHS, then you'll feel very comfortable in this environment, but you won't have the sort of baggage or the fear of the NHS that might, at any given point, pull the rug from under your feet. So you're building up something for yourself, and yet you're keeping prices competitive. And of course, if you're in a slightly poorer area, I would like to think that the prices that you'll get for your property will also be quite competitive.
Yeah, good point. So do you want to just give a little bit of a rundown of what we did? Yeah,
so just a little bit about what we did, and I suppose the journey is something that's applicable to many people. So we found our first surgery in Wandsworth Town in London, which was slightly suburban, but still quite urban, I guess. Zone 2 within London. This was an old, disused doctor's surgery, hadn't been used for years, so it was in a bit of bad shape. And we didn't need to acquire the D1 planning status, which I'm sure you know is what you need to operate a medical or dental unit. So it already had the D1 planning, which was brilliant. And so we converted it from that previous slide. Let's just go back to this one here, which took quite a bit of work. We had to speed things along. We had about 8 weeks to turn everything around, which included putting pipe work in, moving walls, getting rid of the old rot and all sorts of things from the old clinic. And the time was pretty critical because I was also kind of nearly 6.5, nearly 7 months pregnant. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to sort of get a couple of months of work in before I kind of left it to the associates, which at the time I didn't think was a great business decision, but actually in hindsight, right, it all worked out in the end.
And why was it called the Neem tree? Do you want to just enlighten people?
I mean, the neem tree, for those of you who do know, it's a very holistic tree, and it kind of fitted in with what I wanted to do. The name, I think, is very, very important. I didn't want it to be a localized name, so I didn't want it to be, I don't know, John Street Dental, because I knew from the start that I potentially wanted to open more than one, not necessarily in a similar area. I like the idea of the tree because it was holistic, and the neem tree, many parts of it are very useful for medicinal and herbal reasons, from the leaves of the tree to the bark to the oil. It's used in ecology as a pesticide. There are just so many herbal and holistic uses for it. So I just thought it fitted in very well with what I wanted to do. So that's a very useful point for whatever type of practice you want to open. The name should tell a story and invite questions. And this is quite a talking point when patients come in, because for those who don't know what it is, they're curious. And for those who do know what it is, you seem to have a sort of kindred spirit relationship going on with them.
Okay, fantastic. And then what happened next?
So then those patients, those clients that came, they're all city workers predominantly, as I said earlier, 30 to 40-year-old young professionals. And a lot of them worked in Canary Wharf, in E14 in London. As you know, it's a sort of city financial district of the country, actually. So anyway, quite a few jumping hoops and various other things later, when it was proposed to me that this kind of practice would be brilliant if it was in their workplace, and they came from Canary Wharf, we investigated further, and before you knew it, 2 years later, we set up shop in a car park underneath the world headquarters of Barclays Bank. So this is the car park underground, and I don't know, 9 to 10 weeks later, this is what it ended up looking like. So yeah, again, that was quite tough, but by now we sort of knew the model that we were working to. And we opened up 2 surgery clinics, the first one and this one, and that's what it ended up looking like. It's quite dead, to be honest, to start with, because it was an old car park, so there weren't that, apart from Starbucks and us and Barclays Bank, there was nothing there, but it's ended up being a very, very popular mall now. And then in 2010, we decided to go out into suburbia a little bit, kind of more the area that we live in, we still live in. And this is in Esher, KT10, so Esher in Surrey. So now this was a completely different offering to what we had done before. This was going to be a lot more cradle-to-grave dentistry, a lot more families. A lot of the people that lived in Wandsworth, they would be couples that had just got together, probably had a baby. They got to toddler stage, and by then the schools were not particularly great in the area, so they would move out to Surrey and in particular Esher, which is where we would catch them, and then offer things like children's orthodontics, etc., etc. So here there were a few changes. Firstly, the sort of dentistry that we were offering. Secondly, there was space for 3 surgeries instead of 2, and thirdly, it was suburbia, so we were going to offer cradle to grave dentistry, and we thought we'd take a different model and we'd just set up 1 surgery. If you look at the top picture on the left, on the far left, the squarish window, we converted that to 1 surgery, and for 18 months we just made 1 surgery in reception. We plumbed in the other 2 rooms, and we didn't build them until finances allowed, really.
And one thing to highlight, on the previous 2 sites in Canary Wharf and in Wandsworth, they were leaseholds, so we chose them based on location. This one here in Esher, we felt this was a fantastic location, but in this instance we managed to buy the freehold of the whole building, upstairs, downstairs, basement, and so it's a huge building that houses not only the Neem Tree Dental practice, but also housed the Samera business upstairs on the upper floors, okay, as well.
And the other difference that this had, or quite a few differences, one of the other differences was this didn't have D1 planning. So we had to, this was an old architectural office, and so we had to apply for planning permission, which, as you know, takes a good 8 weeks. And finally we did get planning permission, but it was all the purchase was subject to planning permission. And so, yes, so that's another thing that we had to do here.
So it converted from this kind of rundown, it's actually a 17th century building, it's very old, into something that's a barber board, into that's what it looked like on the open day when we opened up. So quite a transformation. And then since then we've evolved it even further, to change of colours, change of brand, and you can see the big sign that says Dental Implant Centre.
And we even had the Olympic cyclists cycle past it
a couple
in
years
Olympic
ago.
years. So that was good. So yeah, they're very different sites, all of them. As we can see, we started off in sort of urban suburbia, then went to the city, or rather the financial district, and that was very, very a very narrow demographic, even more narrow than Wandsworth. And then we ended up in Isha here, which is pure families, all ages, all types of dentistry, a lot more perio, a lot more implants. And then finally we have...
exactly, and then most recently, pictures aren't that clear actually, but we've opened up in...
I've taken on a partner, and this partner has opened up a Fleet Street practice in Fleet Street, rather, which, as you all know, the iconic Fleet Street on the Monopoly board. The demographic here is, again, quite niche, quite narrow. It's full of top-end journalists, lawyers, barristers, judges. So, again, this is a very different niche, but one that we're very comfortable with because, obviously, having opened Canary Wharf, we know this demographic quite well. So we have long opening and working hours. We have 3 surgeries in here. We also have CT scan, OPG scanning facilities as well. So this one is almost acting as a flagship for us.
Yeah, and more pictures of the reception.
And we've evolved the brand a little bit. As you can see, the wall in the background is a bit different to the other walls that we've always had. We're trying to make it look quite like foresty within this urban jungle that is outside, trying to turn things on their head a little bit with those tooth stalls.
So 4 different examples there, and we've done countless others for many other clients we've helped set up. But what do we need to find in terms of suitable premises? Well, first consideration is ground floor versus upper floors. But what are your thoughts on that, Smita?
Well, I mean, this is just a personal preference for me. And this is what I advise all our clients who are looking for this type of practice is always opt for ground floor. I would rather you had 1 surgery on the ground floor than 6 surgeries on upper floors and no ground floor seating area, reception area, or anything like that. Because I just feel that I can only advise on these sorts of practices, i.e. shopfront commercial practices. You need to reduce the barriers of people coming in, and one of the big barriers is it doesn't matter how beautiful the shop front might look, if you peer inside the shop front and all you can see is a set of stairs, that's not very inviting at all. Doesn't matter how beautifully done or lit up the stairs are. So if there is some space on the ground floor, as I say, even just 1 surgery or at the very least a reception area, that's what I advise. The D1 is essential. It's not advisable. It's essential because without D1 planning, which is for medical and dental use, you cannot open up a dental practice. So that's something that you need to really think about. And planning statuses, as you know, are vary for what type of use that you want to make the property. So, for example, A3 is restaurant use, A1 is retail, B1 is office, and as we say, D1 is medical and dental use. Okay. And then, of course, you need to look at is it a new build property? Is it an old, like in Fleet Street, it was a very old building, and in Isha it was a very old building, so we had to convert. But in conversion, you have to look at whether the building is listed, whether it's not listed, what grade listing it is, and that determines whether you can knock down walls. There are certain features you have to be careful about. We were looking at a listed building once about a year or 2 ago, and it was a bit of a nightmare because we had heritage and conservation who came to give us advice, and I basically lost the will to live after that conversation because they wouldn't let us touch anything, and they certainly wouldn't allow us to put any signage outside. Well, it doesn't matter how good the location is. If you've got absolutely zero signage, how are your people going to find you? Yeah. So we rejected that. And of course, with new build, if you're in a lucky position to have a new build on a high street, for example, that's great. But you have to then adhere with everything, with DDA, with disability regulations, building control, so many different things you have to comply with. However, so long as you do comply, you can build something absolutely to your specification, 100%.
And in terms of freehold or leasehold, I think. Yeah, freeholds are great, no doubt about it. However, the reality of getting a freehold in a great location is quite slim, I've seen. Canary Wharf, they would never offer that to us. Fleet Street, that was not available. Wandsworth, that's not available. We were lucky, I suppose, with the Isha site. So choose your premises based on the frequency of traffic and the availability of traffic, not whether it's a freehold or leasehold. Okay, I think that's quite an important aspect.
Yeah, because you're trying to open a business here, and the business is very much dependent on footfall, and it's very much dependent on the right traffic coming your way. Rather than, as Arun just said, whether it's freehold or not. I mean, if it's freehold you're interested in, then just buy a separate, I don't know, either a property, commercial property, or even a house to live in. But certainly from this perspective, for a dental business, it's much more important that you get the location right. So the leasehold, freehold shouldn't be your biggest priority.
And then in summary, I think getting the location right is absolutely critical, and much of the rest will fall into place. Things sometimes might be a bit slow and problems might arise in the early days, but if you get the location right in the long term, that will pay huge dividends for the practice. Okay, so
over to you.
Over to me now. So in order to get to those points of having a wonderful clinic and setting it up and making it look beautiful and getting all those patients through the door, you need a business plan. And experience has taught me that a business plan is absolutely critical to any successful business. So what is a business plan? Well, I've really nailed it down into very few points. It's really just critical to get your ideas and thoughts on paper. We all have wonderful ideas, we all have wonderful aspirations, but nothing really happens if you don't put it down on paper, because you've got to put these ideas on paper and then commit to those ideas. Now, the more ideas you put on there, a business plan is just a form of structure, okay? And the real question is, but why do you need a business plan? Well, it helps you get clarity of what you're doing. Having clarity of what you're going to achieve and what you're going to do is key. It then gets buy-in. It gets buy-in from friends, family, potential investors, banks, and ultimately yourself. Because when you start seeing your ideas flow onto paper and you start putting down your wonderful ideas and aspirations, and you'll, as Smita mentioned earlier, your passion on paper. Once you've got your passion on paper, it makes life a hell of a lot easier to make it a potential reality. And I suppose the third point, as I've written here, is to get financing. Yes, a business plan is most definitely very important and very useful to get financing. But primarily for us, and I remember when we did our very first business plan for the Neem tree all those many years ago, we didn't know we were going to open up in Wandsworth. We didn't even know we were going to call it the Neem tree. All we knew is that we wanted to open up a holistic dental clinic which served a certain type of demographic of patient, which would charge a certain type of fee, which would have a certain type of look and feel to it. And all those ideas went down on a piece of paper. And from that original business plan, the Neem tree evolved. So how do you do it? Well, I've again just listed down some very critical key points here. The vision of what you want to create. You have to really detail what do you want to create, and you must have a vision, you must have an idea of what you want to create and why you want to create it. And as I said, put these ideas on paper. The worst ink survives the best memory is the cliche, and I think that's so important. Put these ideas on paper. Eventually you can put some structure around them with a business plan. Get some help also from professional advisors, people like ourselves or other experienced people within the dental arena, to help you put a conclusive and strong business case together for your dental clinic. Talk to people who've done it before in terms of setting up and helping dentists set up clinics. Don't talk to people who haven't set up a dental clinic before. They won't have a clue. Very different. Dentistry is a very interesting and different business. It's a very capital intensive business. You need a decent amount of money to do it. So get your business plan right. But one of the bits I've really highlighted in here is do this before you find a location. What do I mean by that? Well, put your ideas in your business plan before you find that site. Don't go start looking for locations and calling up agents and running around the country trying to find a spot. Put your business plan first together, and then from that, find a location that works within the framework of your business plan. It might sound a bit odd, but that's how we've done it, and that's how we've done it every time. Because your particulars and your passion and your ideas won't suit every location. You then need to go and seek out those locations and fit them to your business plan. Okay, so detail on paper what you want to achieve, and that will then really help you hunt the right type of locations, but also help you with structure and planning of your business plan. So the business plan is absolutely fundamental. And as I said, seek advice, take some time and plan it and organize it, and then get people to review it. Get yourself to review it. Get the bank manager to review it. Get friends to review it. Get someone who's experienced in business to review it. Get your accountant. Get some advisors to review it. Make sure you do that though. Okay. And then a really important aspect are the financials. It's all well and good having a wonderful written qualitative business plan. We also then have to have forecasts. How much you're going to spend on equipment, how much you're going to spend on running the clinic in terms of staffing, how much revenue you're going to generate, and then also essential to get an idea of how much things will cost for you. Okay, so the financials are really important. I've just got an example financial here, which I'll just show you. I don't know if hopefully you can see it. So this is these are just some forecasts that kind of we build for people. And this is an example one. And in this example, this clinic is quite a nice clinic in a nice area. Put some estimates together, and what we do, we put together costings of build, furniture and fittings, equipment cost, marketing costs. So in this instance, the kind of initial expenditure is about 254,000, give or take. I'm going to try and pare this back, but hopefully it will be better than that. And then what we do is also we put some forecasts together of what the revenue will be and how many hours are open, what the hours of opening will be. So you can probably see it. Hopefully it's not too small. In this instance, this clinic is open from 9 till 6. And then you look at the number of hours, the number of surgeries, weeks per year, hours per week, weeks per year, hourly rate, and then you kind of model what your revenue is going to be going forward. You look at staff costs. You might have a practice manager, you might have a receptionist, nurses. And then what that really comes together, you try and then pull together one kind of big forecast. Okay, so in this instance, in this clinic, we're saying revenue of 5,000 in the first month, 8,000, 8.5, 10, 12.5, etc., going up to hopefully about 35,000 for this clinic. This clinic is actually opening up in quite a high-profile, busy location, but it gives you an idea of what the revenue we're trying to achieve on this clinic. Okay, and then you also then model costs such as materials, lab, associates, and then you have all these other costs of running a clinic, things such as employees, rent, interest, bank charges, marketing, all these other things which are associated with a clinic, and then you eventually see how much money you're making or not making. Okay, so you can get an idea. Okay, now what I'm trying to show you is you need to prepare something like this. Okay, it's not a maybe, it's not a perhaps, it's a definite. Okay, let me just close this down. Let's save that. He's going to let me save it. So what I'm trying to lead to here is it's not a matter of maybe do a model and cobble together some forecasts. Do it right. Okay, if you're going to do a practice, do it right. Get the right expertise, get the right people to help you set up the model, and understand what your costs are going to be going out, what are your revenues going to be coming in. Okay, take some time to do that. And then the question you might come up with is, and how much money do you need? Okay, well, it does depend on that. That was just an example one, but it depends on the location. It depends on the kind of quality of look of clinic, the equipment choice, build requirements and fabric of building, freehold or leasehold, CQC requirements. How much have you saved? Okay, so there's a whole load of things to think about. Now I've got a few questions here on finance. I'm going to try and answer these whilst I'm on the finance topic. One question is, when the mortgage is taken while buying the practice, can the interest paid to the lender be claimed as expenditure? Absolutely. Interest is deductible, so that would be an expenditure and reduce your profits and ultimately reduce your taxable liability. So yes, in instance, interest is tax deductible. Let me just check any other finance ones. There's quite a few here. Okay, and then in terms of financing, what type of security would lenders ask? Is it always required to put another property as security? No. Okay, so let me come on to the next part of the question. How much do you need? Typical range of 100 to 250,000 pound, maybe the range of setting up a clinic, excluding any freehold. Banks will always look at your earnings history as an associate, your ability to repay, your current financial setup. Are you a saver or a spender? They'll also like the idea if you've got your own house or got a mortgage on a house, they see that as a safe bet. And ultimately, banks do want to lend, but it's essential to get the best deal, but rates and terms vary greatly. So most banks will provide a will help most banks will help clients of ours who want to do startups, subject to having the right type of background. So how do you get the money? As I said, you need business plans, forecasts, and there are a plethora of people in the marketplace. There are the well-known banks out there who will lend to dentists, but there are many other people out there who will lend to dentists who may even do better terms. So, and at the same time, you might have some savings. You might want to get some help from family. So, really important to nail the financing early on. Don't kind of just leave it as an afterthought and just accept anything what your bank is offering. Shop around, get the best deal. And in answer to the question that's been raised, what kind of security do lenders ask for? Well, it varies. If you've got a good background, they might ask for any security. Some banks might even lend up to £300,000 to £400,000 unsecured with no security, whilst other banks will say, I want to take security on the first charge on your home. So it does vary, and that's what ultimately shopping around for the best deal will be, and that's something that we do now. So we do definitely do this. We have just recently started Samera Finance, where we provide a solution for dentists and other people looking for finance across the board. This is a picture of Nigel, my new team member. He's the head of commercial finance at Samera, and Nigel is the ex-head of healthcare finance at RBS, so he's newly joined the team, and he has a plethora of experience to help people like yourselves wanting to set up or buy a clinic to raise the finance. So those are Nigel's details below, nigel.crossman@samera.co.uk. He will tell you it straight about how to raise finance and what you need to do, and drop it Nigel an email or give him a call on that number there, and he'll be happy to help. Okay, so but financing, it can be done. If for the right type of person, for the right type of clinic, and for the right type of location, it can most definitely be done. Okay, let me move on to more questions. Questions: are banks lending 100%? Yeah, they are. Sometimes, again, it can happen, and Nigel will be the one to talk to. He can certainly help. What are the normal rates the banks lend at for a squat practice? It can vary between 2 to 3 to 4%. Everything is so varied, and don't forget, if it might not sound a huge difference, 2% or 4%. That's a massive difference in terms of the interest that you will pay over a 20-year period. Remember the power of compounding. You'll be paying a lot more if it's at 4% over a 20-year period. You'll be paying thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds more. So shop around on the rate, shop around on the term of the loan. Some of the tricks that some of the banks do, and this is where Nigel knows his stuff, is that they'll say, I'll give you a term for 5 years, and then they'll charge you a kind of arrangement fee. But after 5 years, you have to refinance again. And what they'll do, they'll charge you another arrangement fee. So it's important to understand the term of what you're borrowing. Is it a 20-year loan, or is it 4 times 5-year loans? If it's 4 times 5-year loans, you're having to pay arrangement fees every 5 years, which works out very, very expensive. So there's a combination of things you have to look at. And someone like Nigel will be able to guide you most certainly through that. Okay. One of the other questions that's been just asked here around the financial angle is, should I incorporate? Possibly. Depends on each person's circumstances. Tax rates for limited companies are very attractive. However, taking money out of the company under the dividend rules, tax rules, has changed most recently. So it's not as attractive as it used to be. But at the moment, we're setting up a client who is literally starting up a clinic, and we've advised him to go down the incorporation route and run it as a company from day one. So potentially possible. Okay, so I think it's something to certainly consider. Okay, let me go back to another finance-related question. What about PHI? I assume that means permanent health insurance. Quite possibly you'll need it, and as a requirement from banks, they will most definitely want you to borrow. If they borrow, they'll probably want some insurance taken out. Again, Nigel will to advise on that in that respect. Okay, let me move on then. Okay, lots of questions on financing, but then I suppose one of the things that I'm going to talk about is mistakes that I've seen. Okay, I can't believe I've been talking we've been talking for 50 minutes. With mistakes that we've seen, wrong location. I know Smita mentioned it earlier, but wrong location. That's quite often the case. People then, second mistake, spent too much money, got carried away. If you've got deep pockets, fair enough, but a lot of people borrow too much and then get carried away and spend too much money on equipment. Personal outgoings are too high, which drains business of cash quickly, and they can never really recover. Other mistakes we've seen are performing dentistry they should not be doing. They haven't got the experience to do that type of dentistry, which ultimately leads to GDC issues, which ultimately leads to further problems and reputation, etc. Other mistakes are poor branding and marketing, wrong offering to the wrong demographic. So opening up a nice clinic, high-end clinic in an area which doesn't really have the money or the interest in getting higher-end treatment. And also other mistakes we've seen are poor leadership and team management. You want good leadership, and where does that leadership come from? It comes from you. If you're the clinic, if you're the leader, if you're the owner, if you're the business practice owner, the leadership comes from you. So you've got to be willing to get your hands dirty. If the floor needs cleaning, show the team how to do it. Okay, so team management, it's not about them and us, it's about inclusive, working together. And if you get a team that works together, things start to fly. Success, that comes from a clearly articulated vision, so communicating that to everybody in the team, and including yourself. It also means a leadership style that encourages input from all team members, as I just mentioned a moment ago. So everyone has a vote, everyone has a voice, and everyone feels like they have a voice. Being consistent of your offering, managing that money, knowing how much you're spending, recording it, seeing what can improve, seeing where you can pare back costs, seeing what you can change. Measuring the effectiveness of your marketing. You could be spending lots of money on, say, Google AdWords, but you then have to think, okay, and you're getting patients, but are you actually converting those patients? And are those patients converting into paying customers, which hopefully give you a positive return on income or return on investment? And also, I think a really key point Smita mentioned, and you're going to hear from that you've probably heard this from me before if you've seen me talk before, a passion to deliver a great service to your patients. You have to be passionate about what you do. If you're not passionate, people will see it. People will kind of think, you know what, not that interested, I don't want to do it. So really, if you're going to go into opening up a clinic, if you're going to go into setting up a clinic, if you're going to go to buying a clinic, you've got to be passionate and you've got to jump in with 2 feet and commit, okay? You can't just have one foot on one store, 1 foot on the other. It's more likely to fail that way. Go for it and give it your best shot. Okay, so before I go on about our boot camp that we're talking about, I'm going to answer some more questions though. So let me get these questions that have been asked. So, is it financially sensible to put down a deposit? Depends on how big the deposit is. I would certainly say most banks will want to see some kind of contribution for a clinic. They like the idea. I think they like the idea of you putting some money in, so it shows your commitment and how realistic you are. So I think it's something that's quite often the case. You might not have a choice if you've got 10 or 15% to put down. They'll want you to put into it. Or alternatively, they'll want you to take some security off you. In addition, what percentage approximately do lenders expect you to put in? I kind of answer the second question. I think 75-80% of that people will want. So I think, again, lending is available, but the banks will expect you to put some money into the pot. They want you to show commitment. Let's see another question. Another question I've got here is, how do you suggest I start working there effectively to begin with, whilst waiting for patients to call or walk through the door? Well, that's a good question. One of what we've done in the past is we'd open a clinic and we'd have a receptionist there from day one. And even before that, if whilst we're doing the building work, we'd put signage up on the windows outside, and those calls to that practice would actually go to one of other practices, and you'd book the patients in even before you've even opened. And patients would then hopefully start booking. And you may be working elsewhere as an associate somewhere else, but then you want to try and go and see those patients that maybe in the evenings or the odd day that you're working there. And you've got to build this thing up. But if you have the door closed, or if no one's answering the phone call, you're never going to be able to build that up. So you have to take that step and hire someone to help you build the clinic. And is there a risk to it? Of course there is. But if you're going to go for it, you've got to do it properly. Another question. Let me see what else we've got here. Check what we've got. For squat practices, how much contribution to banks? Okay, I've answered that already. So I'd say to anything between 10 and 20% they'll want you to contribute for a squat practice. Another question, interesting, is parking an important factor? I think in terms of, it's useful, but quite often in central London or central cities, it's actually quite difficult to get. I think you could get, when you're putting for a planning application though, you might need to say, how are people going to park? So you need to have some type of statement from people saying, how are people going to park to help you get the planning permission? But I don't think parking is the overriding factor. It may be a nearby car park, it might be a nearby supermarket. I know in our instance in Isha, we have a Waitrose across the road. A lot of people just park in Waitrose and pop over to the clinic. So it certainly helps, but not by all means the only thing, okay? What else have we got here? I think I've answered most of the questions. Okay, one guy, chap, okay. So the question is, I had found an ideal location, formulated different income bank. Okay, so I've got someone here. I'd found a location, formulated detailed business plan, research demographic. Banks, however, would not lend based on only projections and risk because of no initial income. Sourcing funds from other lenders at higher rates led to collapse of projections. What other financing options are available? Well, for the person who's asked this question, if you've got a proposal and you've found a location and you haven't managed to get any finance, just drop me an email after this call and I can put you in touch with Nigel and maybe he might be able to help there, okay, in that respect. Okay, so any more questions? I'm firing through as well. Which banks are the major lenders? Okay, which banks are the major lenders? I suppose they're the main high street banks, Lloyds, NatWest, RBS, Barclays to some extent, HSBC when it comes to dentistry. But again, it all goes back, that's irrelevant to be honest with you. It goes back to who you talk to in the team and how you're going to present your pack to the team, okay, each of these banks. If you don't present a very kind of comprehensive and well thought through pack, the rates you'll get offered will probably be much higher. So that's why someone like Nigel can really help to package you in the best light to you to get the best terms with any of these banks or any other providers of finance. Good question. How do you work out your revenue forecasts? Revenue forecasts are based on opening hours, are based on kind of hourly rates we're trying to set to achieve for the practice, based on historic number of patients we're expecting to see day by day, and also then the types of treatments we're going to carry out. So it's no exact science, it's more of an art, and it goes back by location and location, okay? Another question, mortgage payback and claiming back taxes expenditure. I'm not too sure what that means, but price list, how should we fix our price list in relation to surrounding practices? Well, I think it's important to understand what other practices are charging, but don't remember their overheads may be very different to your overheads. So you need to price it so it works for you, so you still make a decent profit. You might be cheaper than them, you might be more expensive than them, but you need to be able to then communicate to the patient the value that you're providing to them. And let's say your crowns are double the price of the one round the corner, but if your practice looks, feels, and the patient experiences it, then they'll probably happily pay it. So while price is important, you've got to then show value with that price. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. They price things higher, but the value feels the same to the patient. So you really need to think, okay, how am I going to offer value to that patient so they feel they're justified in paying that amount? Another question, will the banks accept one deposit for both the business and freehold? Possibly. That's all I can say, depending on how big the deposit is and how much you need to borrow. Okay, are there any must-haves when setting up initially with regards to equipment or services, especially when initial capital is low? Any must-haves? I'm not sure what you mean by that. What is the worst case scenario if the setup of a squat isn't a success? Well, I guess, to be honest with you, worst case scenario, it goes out of business. I suppose that's the case, but few and far between. I don't think I've seen any go out of business as far as I can recall. None that we've worked with over the years. So, but that's why it goes back to planning it right, getting the location right, working out your money, working out the money's right, and organising yourself. Okay. I think I could go off for questions for all night here at this stage, this rate. So right, I'm going to kind of, one question that's popped out, do you foresee a drop in the prices of NHS practices? Well, NHS practices is an interesting phenomenon. I don't know what's going to happen. No one knows what the new contract is, but the likely scenario is that more and more, well, I suppose the NHS will want more and more for less. Money's drying up within the government. So if it's drying up, they'll want more for less. So the values of NHS practices, I think, potentially could fall further. Let me see. So, right, let me move on. I've had a few questions about boot camp, what we're doing, and what's going on. So I'm going to try and wrap up this slides in the next couple of minutes. But something that Smita and myself run every year is our Setting Up and Practice boot camp. We hold it at Mercedes-Benz World in Weybridge, Surrey, a fantastic venue. It's a 3-day event this year, so we haven't done a 3-day event like this before. We have some brilliant sponsors who are helping us. We have Goodman Grant Solicitors, we have NSK, there's the Handpiece and Decontamination Company, with Hague Dental, we have Straumann Implants, we have Foundation Marketing, we have a range of wonderful people who are helping us. And at this event, I'll be speaking, obviously, Smita will be speaking. We're having Max Bazukina, our head of practice sales, he'll be talking. We'll be having David Hussain, our accounts expert, talking. We'll be having Nigel, who I've been spoken to earlier, Nigel Crossman, who will talk about how to raise finance, and we'll have the opportunity to sit down with Nigel throughout the event to work through your numbers and help you get the money that you need for your setup or your acquisition. And then similarly, you'll have speakers from Goodman Grant, so they're expert lawyers. There'll be people from Hague who'll be talking about how to get the right kit for compliance. We'll be hearing from Straumann about implants in your new clinic. We'll be hearing from NSK again in terms of equipment and stuff. So we've got a range of speakers on how to set up or buy a clinic successfully. So we've got a range of speakers, people that myself and Smita have selected over the years, who we know, who we've worked with successfully, that can really, really help you achieve your objective, which is hopefully getting you onto the practice ownership ladder if you want. It is most definitely an intense 3 days. We will be doing a visit to our Isha practice at some point. Which day that is yet, I'm not too sure. It's on the 17th to the 19th of June. 3 solid days, a Friday, Saturday and a Sunday. And we have a lot of people coming actually now, and it's just getting busier and busier now, but we certainly have a few spaces left. So if you want to book, you can go to our Setting Up and Practice Bootcamp website link as an incentive for 24 hours only. The current price on the website is $999, but for 24 hours, our spring deal extended, and you can get it for $599 plus VAT. An email will follow after this with details about it. Alternative, if you do want to get this $599 price, you can call Juliet tomorrow on 0203 747 3296. If you're serious about buying, or if you're serious about setting up and you want to hear more what we've talked about today, and share all about the ideas that we've got, I think it'll be most relevant and useful for you. Okay, so Smita, any kind of last comments from you?
No, really. I mean, I think it was just quite comprehensive, though. Of course, it's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the whole idea around setting up, and I think obviously on the course we go through a lot more detail. But I think the key point really is a very simple point from my point of view. If you are looking to set up your practice, or indeed to acquire one, there's just one word or three words that I think I'd like to finish on, and they are, just think about this: location, location, location.
Thank you, Smita. And I think I'll add to that kind of simple message. Passion is critical in this whole thing. If you're going to be successful in business, you're going to be passionate about what you do. And if you're passionate about what you do, the success will come. Will it come immediately? Will it take some time? Probably will do. But if you're serious about it, it'll make it happen. Thank you very much. You will get an email from me shortly later with the deal that we're offering. Similarly, I will send copies of the slides out separately as well on another email. And there is a recording of this whole webinar, which will be available on our blog shortly as well. Have a good evening, everybody, and thank you for your time and attention.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.